What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. Just got out of seeing George Miller's latest film, 3,000 Years of Longing, starring Tilda Swinton, Idris Elba, based upon the short story The Djinn and the Nightingale's Eye by A.S. Byatt, and it is your classic kind of genie in a bottle situation, three wishes in exchange for freedom. And I can't believe that I almost didn't go to this movie because I'd been reading all these reviews and seeing how critics were very divided, or at a minimum, their reactions had been mixed. The trailers had done nothing for me. And I was thinking to myself, do I really want to go spend money to sit in a theater for 2 hours and watch this thing? But then I gave myself a good swift kick in the ass. I was like, this is fucking George Miller. He's been entertaining us for decades. His most recent movie, Mad Max Fury Road, I think it's a strong contender for the most cinematic, awe-inspiring action spectacle of the last decade. It's like, if he doesn't have the credit in the bank to get your ass to the theater to see his latest film, like, then who does? So I'm very glad that I went, because I think for like the first 45 minutes or an hour, I was more often than not kind of enthralled and occasionally in awe of just the visionary spectacle on display. And then by the end, I realized why critics had kind of turned on this movie, because it just fizzles and dissolves into nothing. And I was thinking to myself at the end, like, that's an hour and 45 minutes. Like, the last 30 minutes feels endless. It goes nowhere. And you'll just be wondering, what the hell is this movie even about? And the answer is, it's a movie about love. But the love story is kind of weak. Where this movie thrives and where this movie excels is in its love of and celebration of the art and value of superb storytelling. Tilda Swinton's character is one that I could really relate to, because she's so obsessed with storytelling that she's made it her sole focus in life. It's her only vocation, at the expense of love and a personal life. I mean, she loves her independence, but you get the sense that the more she talks about how much she enjoys her independent lifestyle and her academic pursuits and her lectures and her presentations, that perhaps there is something missing. And while she's staying in Istanbul giving a series of lectures, she happens upon a genie in the bottle, or djinn as they say in this. I'm just going to call him a genie because I'm a little bit of a redneck and I've been calling him a genie my whole life. I can't start calling him djinn. It makes me sound very pretentious. But Idris Elba is one hell of a genie. He pops out. But because Tilda Swinton's character is an expert in storytelling, she knows all the cautionary tales about where wishes go wrong. And one of the examples she gives is of three guys on a boat who are stranded, they're starving, they catch a magic fish, and the magic fish offers to give each of them one wish. One says, I want to be home with my wife. Boom, he disappears. The next one says, I want to be in a field playing with my kids. Boom, off he goes. And then the third one says, I miss my friends, I want them back. And boom, they all come back. So anyway, cautionary tale. Wishes sometimes are like a snake eating its own tail, where it doesn't quite work out. And so as a way of kind of buying time and figuring out whether or not this genie is a trickster or truly someone who's going to actually deliver as promised, she coaxes him into telling the story of his life. And Idris Elba proceeds to tell several fascinating tales all about the various loves of his life, as well as the various ways that he was imprisoned over the years. And the first one is so good and so well done and so heartbreakingly short. I would argue that the whole movie is worth going to see and spending $20 in a theater just to get the experience of that first tale, where if you like stories of myth, if you like stories of fantasy, you will be absolutely just mystified by just the heartbreaking, staggering, imaginative genius on display during this one segment. Because as it turns out, this djinn was there for the story of Solomon and Sheba, and he's here to tell us exactly how it went down. And as someone who's a bit of a fantasy junkie, it's very rare that I am surprised or caught off guard by just the details and just like the rich texture of a particular story. But when it came to Solomon and the way he performs music and like these mystical enchanted instruments that he's using and all these mythological creatures and godlike beings that are there, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And more importantly, it was that level of fantasy combined with like erotica and lovemaking or fucking. I mean, it's a full-blown sex scene in the middle of this tale of myth and love and fantasy. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. So as I was watching it, I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm just going to end up being the one person on this planet who really likes this movie, because I just could not believe that critics would turn on this movie after seeing that. But then I got my first warning sign with the second story. Still really good. It's filled with these killer epic battles and tales of sultans and battles over succession, and this one warrior king who's unable to find happiness in life unless it is on the battlefield, just laying low to his enemies or listening to the stories of this one master storyteller. But as great as that was in terms of depicting the power of storytelling, there's this great side plot of his kind of idiot brother or idiot younger brother who's morbidly obese, who's obsessed with morbidly obese women, and we get subjected to or treated to these wild orgies of very large people, and once again, full nudity, etc., and so forth. And I just kind of sat back and just started howling with laughter because it was like audacious filmmaking, and it's so rare that we see audacious filmmaking. More often than not, we get two kinds of filmmaking. We get big animated movies for kids, or we get franchises. And I get like the models involved make it very difficult to recoup your investment on a film unless you have certain stars or certain built-in fan base, etc. Once again, I get why old intellectual property is constantly being exploited. But what this movie reminded me of was a different era where filmmakers could just make standalone movies that would have to succeed or fall on their own merits. Kind of like The Witches of Eastwick, which he made back in 1987. And at that time, he was coming off his Mad Max trilogy, one of the coolest franchises of all time. And he'd also delivered the segment Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the remake of the original segment of The Twilight Zone for The Twilight Zone, the movie. And suddenly he goes off and works on The Witches of Eastwick, which when I saw as a kid a million times, I had no idea who George Miller was. I was just enjoying it for its own sake. It's a movie with witchcraft and devils and lovemaking, and it was very mature and had like a weird sense of humor, and I just loved it. And they've never made a sequel. They've never done a remake. So I feel like for people who enjoy a movie like The Witches of Eastwick, they'll probably enjoy 3,000 Years of Longing. That is at least until the end, where once again, the movie, there's no getting around the fact that this is a very flawed film. It's like air going out of a balloon. And you're like, no, why are you doing this? Like, how come you started filming this movie when you didn't have an ending? But that's what they did. So if I were to make a case as to why people should see this in the theater as opposed to waiting to watch it at home, there are several reasons. First and foremost, it's just cool to see a filmmaker who's nearly 80 years old making interesting, dynamic, personal films. Even flawed though it may be, this is a big swing. He took a giant risk, and it doesn't quite work, but oftentimes it does. So I feel like that kind of risk-taking and that kind of personal filmmaking on a large scale should be supported by at least our curiosity. I'm not saying you have to like it, but at a minimum, we should be curious because we obviously want to see more filmmakers taking these kinds of risks and getting more kinds of movies like this in the theater. But also, once again, Mad Max Fury Road, that movie was so fucking good that even if he were to make 10 lousy movies in a row, I feel like he still would deserve our support just because, I saw Mad Max Fury Road, I think 5 times in the theater. I think 3 of those were in IMAX 3D. That is pure raw cinema. That is the essence of cinema. That's what we want from cinema when it comes to just visual storytelling on a grand scale that is completely, totally transportive, that takes us to another world. It's an impossible dream to ask for him to match that or exceed that, even though he is currently working on his Furiosa film that's going to be coming in 2024. And I'll freely admit, I'm very excited to see what he does with that. And I'll be the first in line to check it out, hoping and praying that lightning can strike twice in the same place again. But the other major reason to see this would be if you are a massive fan of Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. Tilda Swinton, I think, is one of the most dynamic, risk-seeking actresses of her era. She's got a giant body of work at this point with so many remarkable movies to her name. She's worked with so many amazing directors. Throw a rock, like basically get all the best directors in the world, and chances are she's worked with most of them. She's incredible, and she's doing her signature, just, first-class acting from start to finish throughout this. The flaws of the movie are in the script. The flaws of the movie are in the fact that it lacks a third act. And I hate to be so kind of technical about breaking down a movie into one, like first, second, and third act. But it's got a brilliant first act. It's got a really solid second act. And then it has no third act. And so, yeah, the movie just falls on its face. But goddamn, Tilda Swinton, she is swinging for the fences every step of the way. And Idris Elba is an incredible dance partner. he looks fucking great as a genie. He's like, he spends most of the movie just as this kind of hulking naked man in a bathrobe, kind of taking up most of her hotel room in Istanbul, and slowly but surely he comes down to more earthly proportions for their ongoing dialogue. But in a lot of ways, it just seems like almost like black box theater. It's just two people in a room having a conversation, which in a strange way is almost kind of like old school indie filmmaking in a lot of ways. And then that, those ongoing dialogues are broken up by these giant epic stories that he shares about his past. But I'm looking right now at George Miller's films on IMDb, and it's just now occurred to me, he's got a handful of movies that I have not yet seen. I guess there was a long stretch where he was just making the kinds of movies that I'm not particularly interested in. I mean, 1979, Mad Max, I'm there all the way. 1981, The Road Warrior, I'm there all the way. 1983, Twilight Zone the movie, I'm there all the way. 85, Beyond Thunderdome, I'm in. 87, Witches of Eastwick, sold. Lorenzo's Oil I saw once on TV. I barely remember it, but it's fine. It's kind of a character-driven drama. But then he went into Babe, Pig in the City. I hear it's great, but I've never seen it. And then Happy Feet 1 and 2, which I could not give less of a fuck about. But this is 3 giant kids movies. Although I remember Gene Siskel saying that Babe, Pig in the City was his favorite movie of the year right before he died of cancer. So, I don't know, maybe I'm being just a prick by refusing to see it. But in the end, I'm just not that interested in movies that seem to be geared exclusively for kids. But then obviously in 2015, he came roaring back with Mad Max Fury Road. And I really can't say enough positive things about it. And I think one of the best reviews that I heard of it, Bill Hader was describing it about how one of his friends was so impressed by it that when he went back for like the 3rd or 4th time, he put on a suit just out of respect for the majesty of that awe-inspiring achievement. In any case, I'm thrilled that George Miller is still active and that his imagination is still firing on all cylinders. There are not a lot of directors of his era that are still going strong. I mean, Ridley Scott's older and still doing good work. I thought The Last Duel last year was incredible, and nobody went because, once again, it's not a franchise movie. It's not a movie for kids, so people just skipped it. But The Last Duel was fucking killer and showed that Ridley Scott could still deliver really strong work. Or Paul Verhoeven. He is right around that same age. He's been making movies for over 50 years and still doing some of the best work of his career. But there are not a lot of these guys left. Or Martin Scorsese. He's right up there in that same generation, still cranking things out. These are some of the few remaining masters of the 1970s, my favorite era of filmmaking. Or David Cronenberg, he's still active, making things like Crimes of the Future. But these are filmmakers that I love and adore, and I cherish, and I look up to, and I admire. So it was a pleasure and a privilege throwing down some cash, going to see this movie, even if the final product was mixed. But once again, about 5 minutes. Solomon and Shiva, the moment this movie is available online, I'm going to be watching that over and over and over again. That is some really special storytelling at play. So I think that's all I've got to say. But before I go, if you haven't heard already, it's smooth sack summer. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're scaped from pubes to bum. That's right. This is the summer to keep your balls cool while still looking hot with Manscaped. The leader in below-the-belt grooming is making sure we all have a ball this summer by giving our pants partners everything they need to stay fresh. Dive headfirst into smooth sack summer by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with our discount code WRONGREEL. That is WRONGREEL in all caps. And I should mention that their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction on-off switch can engage a travel lock, and gives you the ability to turn the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave. I used that product last night, and it gets my highest possible recommendation. So on that image that I just conjured in your head, let's wrap this up. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell. And if you want to talk more about George Miller or Manscaped or whatever, hunt me down on Twitter at Geeking Out. But I can't thank enough for watching the video. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.